Thank you. And if you want to follow along, the slides are available on aina.li/backstage2025, and it'll keep on living there afterwards. There's going to be a slide in the end if you're not catching it now. I also just tweeted it, so if you follow the hashtag, you will be able to see it. There's a lot of links and references here that might be useful for you afterwards. So who am I? I'm going to talk about using the commons without causing a tragedy. What do I know about this? So I run a company called Open by Default, where I consult in helping people working with openness in all various forms. But perhaps more importantly, I've been part of the Wikimedia movement for almost 2 decades. As an editor, as an administrator, and in parts of various types of their surrounding organizations. And relevant for this talk, I built a digital commons myself, or co-built, and I'm a maintainer of GovDirectory, which is a digital commons built upon another digital commons on Wikidata. I'm also in the advisory committee for OpenRefine, which is a tool to clean messy data. Perhaps you will use that to build your next digital commons. I worked in the Foundation for Public Code, where we helped public organizations collaborate when they were building open source. And then I'm just a small-time contributor to iNaturalist and OpenStreetMap, but these are all different kinds of digital commons. So, because if we want to go into how we can use it without causing a tragedy, we need to understand what it is. And the traditional definition, or perhaps the simple way to define what is a commons, is that it is something that anyone can use for free. And traditionally, this has been like the air that we breathe, or perhaps water we get from the river, maybe not very feasible in many places nowadays. Or if there's a village with a common field where everybody, all the farmers, can have their cattle grazing. And I'm going to come back to that one later. But the digital commons is, of course, something very different than all of these physical resources. And there's a lot of different definitions. So I'm not going to use the one by Adar and Huberman, where they're talking more about like file sharing as a digital commons. I'm not going to go into the infosphere that Greco and Floridi was defining, because that's much bigger. But something much more like what Yoshai Benkler popularized with the commons-based peer production. But even sort of like a slight take on that too, because what I'm talking about is something that is explicitly open when someone is using a free license. And this matters, and I'm going to come back to that also later, because someone really chose a legal way for you to be certain to reuse this. They want you to reuse this. So that's really the key for my definition of the digital commons. And some examples is, of course, Wikipedia and Wikidata as some sort of like content of digital commons, but there's many different sources. We have the Contributor Covenant, which is a code of conduct for open source projects, but it's also under free license, so you can adapt it and reuse it and have slightly takes on it if you need to. And then, of course, there's a wealth of different free and open source software, and I just chose Inkscape as one example because I use it almost every day. But also, it's a tool that you're not only drawing in this vector graphics program, it also has a command line interface, so you can build in that into your tools or workflows in various ways. So that's just some examples of what it is. But that all sounds very good. Like, what is this tragedy you're talking about? These were all good things. And this goes back to a very old observation. Aristotle wrote this down almost 2 millennia ago, or about 2 millennia ago, and he might not even be in the first either. But it's the observation that if no one owns the thing, no one really cares to take care of it either. And where you see someone taking care of something is where there's clear ownership, and it's those people who are the owners who put that in. So this has been sort of like a known tendency for a long time. But then in 1968, Garrett Hardin wrote this paper, The Tragedy of the Commons, and sort of like coined that specific term. And he used this example of a field in a village where the farmers took their one cow and had it graze. And everybody was happy. But then one of the farmers realized, hey, if I bring 2 cows here, I'm going to get more resources for my family. And then someone saw that and copied, and then the race to the bottom began. And you have this tragedy where you come to overgrazing of the commons. And it's a tragedy for everyone. No one can really use it. But this doesn't necessarily transfer exactly to the digital commons, because resources are not finite in the same way. But there can be some sort of like bottleneck effects or other resource problems in the digital realm that's not the same as in the physical. And I would sort of like group these into 3 different areas: overload, depletion, and subversion. And 2 are sort of like accidental, and the last one is perhaps a little bit too intentional. So we're going to talk about them differently. But overload is really when the maintainers of a digital commons get overloaded by whatever happens. Like, it could be too much information, it could be regulation, sort of like what happened when the GDPR came about. It was tough for many. It almost happened with the Cyber Resilience Act. I think we got away a bit. But it's when it gets too much to handle for it. And it could also be like in a popular project. It's just too many feature requests or bug reports. So it's a burden for the few maintainers. And then just recently, we also seen this AI slop. The curl project, and Daniel Stenberg has been writing a lot about this, where people trying to solve their bug bounties or reporting vulnerabilities by just asking the AI, do it for me, and they don't know what it is, and it's just something that sounds very plausible, which put a lot of burden to the maintainers to see through this. Whereas the depletion, instead of being overgrazing of a physical resource, here we're talking about perhaps the human resources of the community or the financial resources of it. And we was also mentioned in the keynote in the beginning how it was almost a successful attack on the XZ project just due to the community being overloaded. And of course, the financial thing is when you get popular, bandwidth increases, disk space increases. And I think we've seen a lot of different cases of this with the Twitter migration. And enthusiasts started their Mastodon instances and let too many people on to it, and it got very expensive. The subversion is really different, because whereas the 2 first ones were accidental side effects, here we see something that's sort of like intentional. But I want to talk about them a little bit, even though anyone who wants to be using the commons should know not to do bad things. But they're sort of like, could be hard to see through. So we have one case of the North Face, the clothing company. They take these nice photos for their website and so on, hard to access, very nice nature points. And they decided, hey, we want to upload those to Wikimedia Commons and put them under a free license. And wow, well done, you're sharing, that's very good. Now, there was a little problem, because in every picture there was someone wearing the North Face clothes seen there. So, well, if it's in a repository, anyone can choose to use them or not. That's kind of all right. And since they were under a free license, if you like, you could crop them out. But they went a step further. They went into the Wikipedia articles, removed the images that were already there for their own, with the products on them. So that's sort of like stepping over the line. Sometimes, like they had professional photographers, so sometimes the photos were objectively better, but in many cases not. In a similar but different way, PostNord is starting to use OpenStreetMap when delivering mail in Sweden. And just that is sort of like a win for the community. Hey, they're using our thing for this, it must be good. And they were also seeing a lot of stuff because they were on the ground. And so, hey, the OpenStreetMap is not updated thoroughly here. We can do it better. So well done. They contributed to the community. But then one day, some of the drivers were sort of like, hey, the routing software is taking us on a detour. I can go straight there. So, and what they didn't do was go back home and say, we need to adjust our routing software. No, they changed the classification of the roads so that the routing software chose that road. And not so cool. This could even be dangerous if there's like this wrong kind of traffic get routed on there. But of course, you all know this, like if you want to use the commons, you shouldn't do these bad things. So it should be possible, right, to avoid a tragedy? Or is it always a tragedy when trying to use the commons? Will we always end up there? And luckily, this theory has been refuted also in theory. Elinor Ostrom, who was interested in this field back in the days, noticed, also aware of Hardin's work. There are actually commons, normal commons, who are working and has been working for centuries. Why is that? And she started to research this and then went on to win the Nobel Prize in economics. Because what she found out that was missing in the first article is that if you add some governance to it, you can actually manage commons resources to be sustainable. And Hardin himself also wrote papers later talking about, yeah, I really meant the unregulated commons in my original piece of work. And one of my favorite examples from Ostrom's work is where there was drought in Western USA, and people were, of course, starting out hoarding the water for themselves. But then the community got together and just talked to each other about what was the needs in the community. And very quickly, it could be shared much more fairly. And that was a very thin layer, just meeting and talking, thin layer of governance. Now, how does that transfer then to use? Should you go out and sort of like enforce governance in different projects that you want to use? That's not really feasible and not really nice either. And you don't also want to go just finding the ones that have good governance and use those resources. So I thought about this, and I think there are sort of like three ways to use this, three strategies for responsible use. And I grouped them into collaborative use, the responsible contribution, and ensuring longevity. So those are the ones we're going to dive into. And to starting off with the collaborative use, is mainly built by volunteers. Not all and not solely. There are all kinds of combination where there's an organization with staff. Some digital commons is all by staff. But most of them rely on a lot of volunteers. And having that in the back of your head when you're communicating with this community will give you the right expectations. And talking about expectations and going back to the governance from Ostrom, one thing that you sort of can open up for this is to radiate intent. And I'm linking here to a superb blog post that I really think you should go read afterwards. It's called Don't Ask Forgiveness, Radiate Intent. And it really busts a hole in the myth of the other old saying, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And that's really harmful. Instead, you should radiate intent. So how that could be is like you see a digital commons that you want to use in some way and say, hey, this is very nice. I would like to take this and do this with it. And then you open up for someone to come in and say, oh, yeah, that is nice, but if you continue to do that, you're going to cause this trouble down the line, something that you couldn't foresee because you don't have the insight to the digital commons. But even better, it opened up for someone to say, oh, that's really nice. I want to help. It could be just that simple. By talking what you want to do, you increased your community. But it could also be like, I want to use it in this way, and someone says, that's really cool, but we have this other data set that is better for this, or this API, or this software library that should solve your problems better. And if things comes to worse, this is also some kind of insurance for you that you have shown that you have acted in good faith all the time. You told people what you want to do, how you want to do it, that you weren't setting out to cause harm. So it's also good in that way to radiate intent. And then, of course, it's always lovely for everybody who see that, oh, the resource that we are building is useful for a wider ecosystem. That's very good feeling for them since they're building something to be reused. You can also promote sort of like direct engagement from whatever you're building into the resource that you're using, some feedback loops of sorts. So perhaps if someone uses your thing, spots error in data perhaps from a resource that you're using, point them back to the original source so we can correct the data in the source. Now, when you do that, you want to have the entry points that that community wants you to have. Otherwise, you build up triage logs like this overload. So radiate intent and say, hey, we would like to contribute feedback. Where do you want it to land? We come back to that. And then, of course, you should attribute this. Sometimes it's legally required, depending on the license. But even when it's not, I think you should still sort of like be proud of what you're using. Say, hey, this is built with Wikidata, or this is powered by MediaWiki, or whatever thing you're using. Because that will also give other people ideas that these are useful tools, and that builds upon the community, and that will give you benefits in the end also. So those were the things around the collaborative use. Now, you could also do some real contribution and not only using it. And here, you really need to read and follow the guidelines, really. I'm not saying you snarkily read the manual, but I'm saying that you shouldn't assume that all projects want to be contributed to in the same way. Some projects are very happy for you to just upload a data set or send in some images, or even just make the PR because the proof is in the pudding. If we can see the code, we know what you want to do. Whereas other projects want you to create an issue first or make a request somewhere. And I've even seen a trend lately that people want you to start a discussion even before creating an issue. And this is good for you in the way, if you follow the guidelines, that you will not be stuck on bureaucracy when trying to make a good contribution. You are not being stopped. No, this is not the way we're doing things here. You should do this first. By reading it first, you will have a smooth sailing through it for everyone. So it will benefit you when you're coming with your contribution. And then you should also be mindful of any impact this could have. If you're making a substantial contribution, it will have some sort of impact because most projects have quality standards of sorts. It might vary what it is, but they do have something. So if you come with just one image, it's easy to do a review. But if you come with 100,000 images, then perhaps people want to take a good look at the metadata. And there are different ways to mitigate this. So if you have like data or images or content of that sorts, and it's all the same, you can do a pilot with a small set and say, I have more where that came from. But if you're making a code contribution, it might not be trivial if you have like a pull request or merge request that's touching all the code. It might be hard to divide that. So it might need to be a big thing. So there you can think, hey, if I'm putting this burden of review to the community, can I help out and review something else so that they don't feel bad of a backlog building up while they're reviewing my request? And that is, of course, an investment of time for something that you didn't want to set out to do. But in the end, it might land you the thing that you're going to be the first user of. And sometimes the other things that you review will also be useful for you. So it is an investment, but it can benefit you. And then, of course, beyond contributing, I was talking about ensuring longevity. And here there are a lot of different things that one can do. And first, coming back to contributing, like contributing to the resource itself is something that you can do. You can add to the resource, but don't step over the lines like North Face did. Or you can enrich the resource, but don't be hacky like PostNord was. And then you can report errors. As an end user, you will see the data where the commons with a very different perspective than the maintainers. It can be very valuable things that you're looking at. And then give feedback in general. If you're appreciative of this, everybody loves to hear it. I know the Wikimedia Commons photographers usually ping each other, say, hey, I saw your image being used over there. And everybody is sort of like, yes, that's why I shared it. And then you can also contribute back to the community itself. And that's very different from the resource. And the first thing that you can do that costs absolutely nothing is to be a positive force, use a positive tone. It really makes a difference for someone, especially if they're a volunteer. If they know that, oh, this evening I have to look at this request or question from this grumpy person, or, oh, this is the jolly person that already said thanks to us. I want to go home from my work and spend my spare time to help them. So that really can change the dynamics. Then if you're talking investments, you can sort of like take on some work that is benefiting the community. It could be something as simple as just be the person who's sending out the invitations for the monthly community call. Sounds like almost like nothing, but getting a cadence for any project could be very crucial to get it healthy and to sustain. And then more classically, you can just sponsor things that the community are doing. Depending on where you live, it might even be tax deductible. One thing that often gets overlooked is acting as a host in various ways. Perhaps you have a server that easily can also host a mailing list that almost takes no resources for this community. Perhaps you have a conference room that the community could have their yearly board retreat in. Perhaps you have a larger office space where there could be a hack day. Or you're running a Jitsi server where the community calls could be held. And then perhaps a little bit more complicated way or less clear way to contribute to the community is actually buying services if someone is selling that around this community. So if you're going to use some open source, you could pay someone for deploying and being your support on it. Not only do you not have to do the work, but you're also making a fixed point in the community where someone has the resources to sustain, to stay around. And they are probably contributing back in turn to the community. So you're sort of being an enabler there, even to just pay, you get what you pay for, but you're also making everyone better. And then the easy thing is to just throw money at them, donate. That's simple to do, and it's probably also very appreciated by all of the communities that get money thrown at them. But some might not have the organization to receive it. And on the other hand, many of the other things buy you some sort of like credibility in the community that a donation simply doesn't do, because you're taking on a role and becoming part of the community. And that's worth something for the community. And coming back to the buying services, you could also be the one selling. Perhaps you're the expert in deploying this, or you're the one who can consult in this data set. And we heard from the keynote as well that it's really important for some organizations to be able to rely on this kind of support. Public organizations, for example, might not procure anything if there's not someone that they can call. So there's really a business opportunity here that is also making you this kind of fixed point in the community, and maybe open up the community to new areas. And then lastly in this point is you can extend the ecosystem in some sort of symbiotic way. Don't go out, make a hard fork and forget about the others, but build on top of it, submit your things, improvements upstream, so it benefits everybody. So that was about ensuring longevity. Now, I've sprinkled this in with some sort of benefits for you, but why should you care really? And it boils down to, it makes it possible to continue to use this digital commons, whatever it is. You're helping it stay around. And likely, because of the additive nature of it, is that you will also get improved services back from this digital commons, and especially if others are doing what you're doing. And I think in this world, with all the enshittification we see of all the things, and all the flood of bad news, you can really make a niche of being a role model, being someone who's doing something good. I don't think that one is fully filled yet. There is more room for players to take that role. And finally, since you're working with communities, existing of people, probably very passionate volunteers, and if you're radiating intent and want to do good, it's very likely it's going to be fun. And hopefully also give you a sense of pride. So I do have a call to action, besides giving you a lot of guidance over this. And the first one is, use the commons. All the things I have said is not arguments for not doing this. No, it's how you should do it. You should go out and use the commons. And remember back what I said with my definition? Someone went out of their way to make it legally certain for you to use this. They want you to use this. Use the commons. Use it with love and care, but use the commons. And then if you're not knee-deep building the commons, there are also a lot of opportunity right now to help shape the policy, especially in Europe. So Open Future, and I think there are people, maybe not in the room right now, but around here at their conference, wrote this report talking about how policy is being shaped right now in digital commons. So, in summary, I think tragedies can be avoided, but it will take a conscious effort from your side, might even an investment, but I think it will be beneficial for your long-term use of this. And maybe we have 1 or 2 minutes for questions.
Thank you for the talk. Can I add a couple of things to your list of recommendations? Because
yes.
It seems to me like one of the best things that you can do is just be aware of what the project is asking for. It seems like there's a kind of tech version of love bombing that could happen if you just kind of come in and you kind of make yourself available. So I might add to that, be aware of what the project is asking for in terms of contributions, and try and build the context for yourself as well so that you don't come into that conversation asking more of the project for them to build the context for you. Equally, there's an exchange there because the project has to, radiate its own intent on that part. But yeah, I just thought I would say that. So thank you for the talk, but I just wanted to add that point.
Yes, absolutely great point. It should go in both to the radiate intent in both ways and also in the point of reading the guidelines, because hopefully they have some sort of wish list.
There was one more question here.
I love the bit about be a role model. I think that's really fascinating. But not on that point. I'm working with a bunch of open source projects around sustainability. And I know it's a very big topic for all of us. In the buying and selling from each other area, we discovered that large organizations like the European Commission are not allowed to donate to projects. So if you sell some version of a support contract that's called a technical support contract, maybe with the wink, wink, we just want to help you, that's a lot easier for some people to buy than, just, hey, could we have some money and we promise to do something good with it, right? And so we're working on a lot of conversations around what would go into different versions of this and different price levels to make it, and, then you can actually really sell support and make the product better over time.
Excellent point as well. Thank you.
One more question over there. It's going to be the last one.
Yeah, thank you. There's another danger that all the big companies are just using open source as a mode to protect others from getting into their business model. If you look into the Linux Foundation, I always call them Big Linux, because this is Google, this is Microsoft, and all the other ones. So, and I work a lot with small companies, and they have all to have a kind of proprietary core just to survive. This is also a danger, because there's also academic research by Cecilia Recap from London University about that the intellectual property is governed by the big corporation, and this is a big danger. So always choose, this would be my recommendation, the license they hate most. This is the AGPL. And then you have a good chance, if you have other licenses to offer, dual license your product and offer some fair license to the other people in the room.
Yeah, it's a good point, but it sort of applies for the person who's building the digital commons. You really can't come in and say, hey, you have to use the AGPL to another project. But yes, agreed. And if you're building something on yourself, take that advice.
All right, thanks a lot, Jan Ainali, for the talk. And we have the next talk coming up in 5 minutes.
Thanks.